Tonight, inside Venezuela.
Did the U.S. military just kidnap Nicolas Maduro?
Fire near the presidential palace in Caracas overnight. Security forces fired at unidentified drones.
Maduro said that he was kidnapped from his home in Caracas.
The government cracks down on any dissent.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the American military has captured President Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
It was so brilliant.
The U.S. was not involved. The country's future now uncertain. Maduro loyalist Delcy Rodriguez.
Why now? Over 2 centuries ago, Venezuela was a part of Gran Colombia, a republic comprising modern-day Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Panama. The U.S. began diplomatic relations with Gran Colombia in 1821, and when Venezuela left the Federation in 1830, relations with the U.S. remained uninterrupted and positive. Lukewarm relations continued until Venezuela disputed the British Guyana boundary and requested the assistance of the U.S., who pressured Britain into international arbitration. Though the tribunal awarded most of the land to the British territory, this began a bigger brother relationship with the U.S. Not long after, in 1902 and into 1903, Venezuela found itself blockaded by Britain, Germany, and Italy due to their refusal to pay foreign debts incurred in the Venezuelan Civil War. Venezuela's president, a certain Cipriano Castro, wrongly assumed the U.S. would enforce the Monroe Doctrine and eliminate the foreign pressures. The U.S., in fact, did not relieve the blockade pressure. However, this incident largely led to the creation of the Roosevelt Corollary, which, in simple terms, gave America the right to intervene anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. The relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela remained unchanged for quite some time, though oil came to be a primary revenue source for Venezuela, and the country utilized American companies, most notably Mobil, Exxon, and Chevron, to extract its vast deposits. All of that would soon change, though. This is Hugo Chavez. He came to power in the December 1998 election on the platform of populism and socialism, leading to his Bolivarian Revolution, which aimed to fight corruption in the country while redistributing wealth, mostly from oil, back to the people. While he was arguably successful in decreasing poverty and opening up healthcare access, his policies also increased economic instability and led to the authoritarian stance of the presidency, which is still evident today. Chavez also notably nationalized the oil industry, seizing assets from Exxon and ConocoPhillips. For those in the country, that was perhaps a win. But that nationalization also began unraveling over a century of relations with the U.S. His policies would continue to alienate the U.S. and other foreign investors, though it also attracted nations unfriendly to the U.S., like Russia, China, and Cuba. In addition to his foreign policy stance, in 2009 he proposed amendments to the Venezuelan Constitution, which would allow the president and other state offices to forego term limits. He claimed in a 2011 interview with Forbes, quote, "I am determined to arrive at 2031. 2 years later, he would die from cancer."
Nicolas Maduro started out as a humble bus driver in the streets of Caracas, eventually rising to become a leader of the Caracas Metro Trade Union. In 1992, when Chavez attempted a failed coup d'etat and was imprisoned, Maduro led a campaign to release him, allowing Chavez to become president 6 years later in 1998. In the year 2000, Maduro was elected to the National Assembly firmly placing him in Venezuelan politics. In the next 13 years, Maduro would move up in the government, eventually running for president in 2013. He won the election by a slim and controversial 1.5% margin. He would go on to maintain the presidency for 13 more years. Throughout Venezuela, there is an abundance of oil reserves. Since the early 20th century, when oil was discovered there, Venezuela has been heavily dependent on the global oil market, accounting for more than 90% of their revenue. This makes Venezuela a rentier state, building their entire economy on oil. But how was Maduro able to stay in power for so long? One of the main reasons is his deep connections with the government institutions in Venezuela. During the presidency of Chavez, the government was turned to be very autocratic and repressive. With this development and the support from foreign ties in the oil market, he was able to keep power for years. In addition to domestic political pressures in the National Assembly, led by Guaido in 2019, the US and other foreign powers sanctioned Maduro's exports and urged him to surrender the presidency, as it had become too dictatorial. In all of these oppositions, Maduro relied on his loyal military to violently extinguish protests that threatened his reign.
Instability doesn't simply appear out of nowhere. Four particular factors: democratic backsliding, control over courts and elections, economic mismanagement, and oil dependency have driven the country to the brink. The insistence of Maduro to remove more and more democratic institutions, perhaps most evident in the creation of the National Constituent Assembly in 2017, a legislator meant to strip power from the opposition-controlled National Assembly, led to a system whereby the people of Venezuela are not adequately represented and also contributed to wide-scale corruption. When Maduro took control in 2013, he also assumed control of the court system, and though they are legally and theoretically separate, in practice the courts have a history of supporting the executive office. That support also extends to elections and furthermore has made it possible for the executive to mismanage the economy and permit corruption without repercussions. Finally, the nation's dependency on oil has meant that daily necessities like food or utilities fluctuate based upon global prices. As such, the economy became increasingly dependent on an industry that was producing less and less each year.
It may be important to note that, as the Keough School of Global Affairs noted in a 2025 article, Venezuela's democratic backsliding is, in many ways, a product of the opposition's decision to resist through more violent and radical methods, as seen in the 2002 coup attempt and the 2003 oil strike. Though in theory these may be good methods to put pressure on the government, Maduro and Chavez were able to justify more purges through the guise of eliminating state enemies, and, given Chavez was democratically elected, the case for the opposition was not widely supported.
The opposition parties in Venezuela inhabit a storied past of disappearances and exiles. The government has used the judiciary to enforce arrests and suspensions of opposition leaders, and in 2017, Maduro banned the main opposition parties from participating in future presidential elections. This game of cat and mouse has created a tense political environment where the opposition's candidates must consider how best to balance their demands with their lives.
The international community has also scrutinized Venezuela. The country is sanctioned by the US, UK, EU, and other states, with just US sanctions alone causing the Venezuelan state to lose between $17 billion to $31 billion in revenue, as according to a 2020 study by the Washington Office on Latin America. That same study estimated that US sanctions would cause Venezuela to lose over $11 billion annually. Average monthly imports dropped by 46% in 2019 and again by another 50% into 2020, leading to an almost $750 million decrease in monthly imports. For reference, Venezuela's GDP was estimated at around $372 billion in 2012. Today, it's only around $80 billion. That is a decrease of 78.5%. That is not a decline, that is an amputation. For reference, if you weighed as much as the average American in the 2012 economy, 181 pounds, you now weigh less than 40. Unfortunately, this analogy has also extended into the real world. Many Venezuelans face extensive issues regarding reliable access to food, and the country has already undergone several famines. The US wouldn't remove Maduro without proper reasons, though, right? Well, thus far the operation has been justified under 4 main points: narco-terrorism enforcement, legal precedent to extradite fugitives, regional security, and the protection of Venezuelan democratic interests. The US has alleged that Maduro was in cahoots with the cartels, allowing narco-terrorists to harbor themselves in the country. As per the American Enterprise Institute, previous operations in Panama, Libya, and Kosovo have given the current Trump administration more than enough justification to extradite Maduro to face trial under U.S. law. This action also falls in line with the Monroe Doctrine and stands as a testament to U.S. interests in maintaining American-backed regimes in the Americas. This strategy relies on the theories of liberalization and democratization, as well as the democratic peace theory, which itself draws back to the protection of Venezuelan democratic interests. The U.S. estimated that Venezuela would be more democratic and stable without Maduro at the helm. Not everyone in America supports the operation, though. Domestically, the American Senate has passed a measure that would restrict the president's power to take further military action, as per The Guardian. Although not an explicit act of war, it's clearly unpopular with American lawmakers, and, as a recent poll by Data for Progress has indicated, a plurality of voters want to be less involved in foreign conflicts. And 55% don't trust the Trump administration to make decisions about military force in Venezuela, and at least 60% oppose using troops to remove Maduro from power. Then, of course, internationally, the US has come under scrutiny for the use of military action. The UN has labeled the extradition a crime of aggression, and many Latin American leaders have come out publicly to denounce the American presence, instead advocating for a Venezuelan transfer of power. How can the U.S. expect to pedestal itself on the moral high ground of freedoms and liberties if it will not respect the very right to sovereignty that all states are given? How can we denounce China for its actions against Taiwan and Russia for its war in Ukraine when we ourselves are ousting leaders in our own backyard?
Venezuela, overall, has become more unstable and violent. Opposition protests are forcefully suppressed by the military, often violating human rights. Over the last decade, Venezuela has experienced increased sanctions on their exports, especially their oil, driving hyperinflation. As a result, their GDP has dropped by around 80% over the last decade. But what does this mean for the people of Venezuela? With a collapsing economy, many Venezuelans have lost their jobs. This, combined with hyperinflation, keeps citizens from accessing vital resources like food, medicine, and healthcare. This tragic development has sparked a mass emigration. Over 7 million Venezuelans flee from destitution and dictatorial oppression. This has led us to today.
Let me just say, it's an honor to be back, and I do believe world history will remember Maduro's extraction not for the geopolitics, but for his horrible fit. That tracksuit is lagging decades behind. Who's gonna tell? We're on quarter zips now. Not to mention those joggers. Did you really need to get a Husky XXL? At this point, I don't even know what to say. This is just a train wreck. You wouldn't catch me wearing that any day of the week. Anyways, back to you guys.
Thank you, Don, for those very insightful comments. The international community has reacted to this brazen action largely with condemnation, though the US was supported by Israel, Argentina, and quietly by the UK. Arguably more loud has been the opposition, spearheaded by China and Russia, who have effectively claimed that Maduro's capture directly calls into question Venezuelan sovereignty as well as concerns about international law. This operation comes as a direct blow to China, Russia, and Iran, who, as according to The Hill, have been assisting Maduro's government in supplying his military with the means to defeat potential U.S. incursions. The success of Operation Absolute Resolve has effectively tamed some of the most modern air defense systems, though it may be important to note that Venezuela does not have the capability to maintain any of the assets that it received prior from these other nations. The failure of China, Russia, and Iranian defense systems has highlighted the tact of American intelligence planning, but also showcased the control that the United States still holds over aerial warfare. Of course, after Maduro was extracted into America, somebody had to take over. That's where Ms. Delcy Rodriguez comes into the picture. Delcy grew up as the daughter of a Marxist guerrilla, and much of her early career was shaped by jobs in Hugo Chavez's government. When Maduro took power, Rodriguez continued ascending the ranks and has worked in many different state sectors, but took over as vice president in 2018. The Trump administration's choice to allow Rodriguez to take the helm as president comes as a surprise to many, but it illustrates the U.S. strategy of focusing on stabilization before democratization. Placing the opposition leaders into power would alienate a sizable portion of the country and may end up driving the country into civil war, given the military is still controlled by Maduro loyalists. While it's still unclear precisely how closely she will work with the U.S. and to what extent she may abide by Trump's demands, as indicated by her tweets, it's clear she is willing to open up to the possibility of American industries reasserting themselves in Venezuela. Until a new election, though, Ms. Delcy Rodriguez is likely to remain in power.
What does the future of Venezuela hold? Will they host elections? Will the US and other countries relieve the country of its crippling sanctions? Will the international community step forward to mediate potential conflicts, or will Venezuela continue to face external and internal pressure, all while remaining isolated from the rest of the continent? Realistically, Ms. Rodriguez has about 6 months left in her interim presidency. When that time ends, she will either allow for elections to take place, almost guaranteeing an opposition win, or she will seize control of the country and act as her predecessors did. With America already showcasing its heavy hand in removing authoritative leaders, I would say that President Rodriguez would be much more likely to host elections, though their fairness may fall into question. If she relents to Trump's demands, then sanctions will almost assuredly come down in favor of rebuilding Venezuela's infrastructure to harness the potential of the world's largest oil reserve. The international community has remained mostly uninvolved apart from obligatory statements, which indicates that mediation will most likely not come from any international agreement. Venezuela right now is at a crossroads. They can isolate themselves and ignore America's demands, or they can open up and agree to the administration's terms on the condition that they give up a deal of sovereignty. Were Venezuela to take the first option and mediate with the US, they would probably be able to stabilize with American assistance and would finally have the capability to extract their vast oil wealth. If the government fights cartels and corruption, then the country very well could move back towards a path of democratization. But all of this would be derailed if President Rodriguez clings on to power. At this point in time, Venezuela has the opportunity to redefine itself and once again step onto the regional stage. Ms. Delcy Rodriguez has now in her hands the choice to follow in the wake of those before, or to tread a new path which would return the state to a liberal democracy and would return the states to peace and stability.
Okay, thank you very much. This is big stuff, and we appreciate you being here. Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice.